So last Tuesday I got the day off work, and for whatever reason shortly after I got up I just had the kind of idea, the kind of impulse to go to a library. I have no idea where it came from, considering that the last time I was at a library was probably about... God, now that I think about it, that would have been over 2 years ago. Yeah, easily over 2 years ago, possibly even 2.5 years. So yeah, needless to say, it's been quite a long while. Again, possibly even more than over 2.5 years. I can't remember exactly. But for whatever reason, I got up on Tuesday. I wanted to get out. I did end up putting it off for a little bit. For a good few hours, I kind of had lunch. I talked to Hayley a little bit, and I just enjoyed myself. I also read a bit, but as it kind of got later into the day, I just began to realise that either I'm pursuing this impulse now, I'm going out there, I'm going to the library, I'm walking there, I'm spending a few hours there, I'm walking back, or I'm going to have to wait until at least Saturday, unless I'm lucky enough / unlucky enough to also get the Wednesday off. So with that said, as quick as the impulses came a few hours before that, I simply got up, I was already changed, and I left. I just walked to the library. Now the Pacific Library that I walked to was Mitchell Library, which is, I say I believe, but I'm almost certain, is the biggest library in Glasgow. So it took me about just under an hour and a half to walk to that. So I was fairly committed. Then again, I've walked that distance and more for less. But yeah, I was interested because it had been such a long time since I'd been there, and in terms of this specific library, I'd only ever been there once before, and it was very briefly, probably for about half an hour. But yeah, I walked in. Immediately I was struck by the architecture of both the outside of it, which is very kind of late Victorian, almost kind of romantic-esque, kind of not necessarily Roman, but there's kind of big pillars around it. There's really striking, vivid statues coming out of the walls, coming out of certain sides of it. It's very flat, it's very smooth, it's sandstone, it's kind of beigey-ish in colour. So it's a very beautiful building, both on the outside and the inside. Whereas the outside of the building, again, it's kind of late Victorian, again Romanesque in certain ways. Again, like very light hints. I'm not necessarily saying this looks like a Colosseum or whatever. It's very light touches to it. The inside of it also has a kind of late Victorian feel, although at least from my perception, it's almost like a hotel. There's the kind of the heat you get from a hotel. There's the red kind of blackish carpet, that kind of familiar pattern. A lot of the walls and the doors are made of hard brown wood. There's a lot of kind of classical paintings and whatnot. If you were to take a picture of it, you could very easily pass a hotel. But nonetheless, walked through it a decent bit until I got to, there's like the hotel bit, which is to a greater or lesser extent most of it, but there's also a kind of modern bit at the ground floor at a certain section. But yeah, I walked through to that. I took a look at a few of the books there, but they're mostly kind of display books when you just walk in. So I continued on my way to the 4th floor, which is where most of the books are. And again, not really having much experience with libraries, it did take me a little bit to kind of get the hang of it, but I figured out that they were using the Dewey Decimal System, so the library also having free Wi-Fi, it didn't take me too long to get keyed into that. So yeah, I kind of looked at mostly just the philosophy section. I ended up getting Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and I read a few chapters of that for about an hour or so. After that, because it was getting a bit later, and I didn't want to just read, I wanted to have a good look about the library to every extent I could. After about an hour and a half, I put down the book, picked it back up, and I just went for a general walk, a general peruse about the library. I looked at the different sections. I looked at kind of history, different kind of literature, again philosophy, politics, and it was pretty well stacked. Although I would realise the next day, so I kind of looked in to a bit more, that there was certain sections that are really well up to date, kind of, well, not necessarily up to date, but they've got good books in them, they've got a wide selection. But there are others which are just really laughably lacking. But yeah, I did that, I walked about for a bit, and when I got to the history section, I picked up a book on the French Revolution, and again, like the Nicomachean Ethics, I sat down for probably about an hour or so. I read a decent chunk of that. I put the book down, then I had a kind of smaller look around the library. Then I went up to the 5th floor, which is kind of old records, old newspapers, rare books, kind of like miscellaneous stuff, records, stuff like that. Lots of law books for whatever reason. I mean, it was nice to have a look at it, but it was rather disappointing as the old and rare books were behind a staff door, and I don't know exactly how the newspaper system worked, but I wasn't there long enough to kind of see that either. So I ended up just leaving from that point. I can't remember exactly what I did afterwards, but for the most part I just walked home. Then we got on to the second day that I went, which was the Saturday. I may have went on the Sunday. I was coming from the perspective of Saturday, I was definitely going to go on the Sunday, but after spending so much time with Hayley and kind of talking to her so much, I think if it was open the Sunday, which again it wasn't, which is what I'm kind of leading up to, I wouldn't have went. So yeah, the next day I went was a Sunday. Much like the last day, I kind of looked about. I looked about the philosophy section. I ended up picking up a book on Proclus, on the existence of evil, which was really handy because the book was only 50 pages. There was 50 pages of introduction and about 50 pages of kind of notes and appendices and afterwards and everything you would have at the end of the book after it. But the actual book itself was only 50 pages, so I skipped the introduction and kind of got to that. I don't even know if I opened the book when I've been in the library and of course talking to Hayley so much recently, and I'm going to talk about that in my second video. I turned on the internet, I got in Discord and ended up talking to Hayley for quite a bit, and it's very strange because again this was only 2 days ago, but I think it's really the breadth of things that happened, the sheer amount. Again, go to the library, but mostly kind of talking to her, all the things we talked about, everything that transpired over those 2 days, that weekend, and to a lesser extent the Friday as well. We just really talked for hours and hours and hours, but again, that's not really for this video. I'm going to make a video about that later on. But regardless, I ended up talking to her for a good few hours in the library, and I was kind of going between the book and her. If she had to go away for 5 or 10 minutes, I could read a page or two. or if she was typing out a particular long paragraph again and go back to the book. I did end up having to reread quite a bit, given that again my attention was divided, but of course I was mainly focused on her. But nonetheless, out of the 50 pages I got through about 40 of them, and again I was there for, God, I must have been about 3.5 or 4 hours to get through those 40 pages, because again kind of 80-90% of my attention was really just devoted to her and talking to her and sharing kind of pictures and whatnot. Not to say that I regret it. Of course there was a reason that I put so much intensity into that compared to the book. But nonetheless, I got through 40 pages off it. Then she went away, I kind of put the book down and I just walked about the library a bit again. And this is when I became disappointed in certain sections of it. As I found that, well, the philosophy section was well stacked, well, things like politics, and I think economics was ridiculous. There was lots of just books upon books upon books about the same subject of no-name authors that most people wouldn't recognise. Lots of the fiction sections as well, like American fiction, kind of like the Western canon basically was very heavily stacked, kind of 19th century, early 20th century stuff. Very well stacked, very well up to date. However, then there was certain things like the Japanese section, which was, I mean, in the Japanese canon you've got a big canon, not as big as the Western canon of course, but nonetheless pretty hefty. I think there was literally half a dozen books, and I don't kind of exaggerate when I say that. There was literally just about half a dozen books, maybe 7, 8, 9, but somewhere in the region of 6 to 12 at the absolute most. In terms of kind of Greek literature and Roman literature, those were also lacking, but some of that may have possibly been in poetry. It could have been divided between different sections, but yeah. The Japanese section, of course, not necessarily of course, but unfortunately was quite lacking. In terms of the history as well, again in certain subjects like, say, the American Civil War, World War II, World War I obviously, which are always ridiculously overstocked. You're dealing with kind of shelves and shelves of books just in those two wars. Whether it's on the whole history of Japan, I think there was about 24 books maybe. So that was quite disappointing. But nonetheless, overall, it's a pretty decent selection there. The history section was very large, even if certain parts of it were quite meagre. In terms of the actual atmosphere of the place, the kind of pictures, again, even the carpets, the walls, the flooring, the kind of design of it, all very much still has this Victorian aesthetic, which I really like. That being said, I don't know if I'll go this weekend for 2 reasons really. Number one, finding out there's certain sections of the library, like the Japanese section, which I'm particularly building up an interest in now, in terms of kind of Meiji and 20th century Japanese fiction, and also kind of historically the Meiji era and early to mid 20th century Japan. Given that there's such a lack of stuff there, it is discouraging. And in terms of the philosophy books I might be interested in, increasingly I find myself becoming more and more disillusioned with philosophy. Not necessarily that I don't like it, I don't think it's useful or I'm just going to stop reading it. But the interest that I had in it, say a few months ago, where I was reading just dialogue upon dialogue upon dialogue of Plato, and then write my own Socratic dialogues, and just I was completely immersed in it. That's pretty much gone for the most part, and again my attention has shifted to Japan and mostly French in terms of a language, but also to a lesser extent the French Revolution. And well, of course there was some books in the French Revolution. For whatever reason, the history of France is also a bit lacking out as well. Again, it's just the usual. We've got countless World War I, World War II books, countless books in the one subject. Way more than are necessary. Many of which will be subpar and mediocre. And then on other topics, where just as interesting, you've got a complete lack. You've maybe got 3 books on that topic, and then a dozen or 2 dozen books on the history of that country. So yeah, again, it's a good library. I feel like, despite some of its flaws, there's a really solid selection there. I think absolutely anyone could find something they enjoy, even if they don't find exactly what they want. And again, the atmosphere, even the seats, the walls, the carpet, the lighting, it just has a very pleasant aesthetic. However, we'll just need to see, but I do want to spend most of my time with Hayley during the weekend. Really just any minute I can, any hour I can. And of course, walking for so long, being at the library, could detract from that. So I might end up just going on shorter walks on both the Saturday and the Sunday, and just staying inside and talking to her, and hopefully, and again this is going to get into the topic of the next video, as we did on Sunday, have another date on the weekend, whether that be Saturday or Sunday. But otherwise, again, just generally spend time together. But yeah, with that, again, overall, I did like it, I really loved it, but there were just certain topics that were lacking, unfortunately.